What's up, gents? It's Mark with another episode of the Pearl Snap Tactical Podcast, the show that gives you the tips and tools you need to make yourself stronger, faster, and harder to kill. This week, I want to ask you a question, and I want to ask, what does it mean to be unbreakable? In this episode, we're going to explore the heroic mindset that's found in myth, philosophy, and warrior traditions of the past. And we're going to draw from a particular story, and this one comes from the Viking Age, where we're going to uncover some ancient lessons on how to guide us into building resilience, honor, and strength in a modern world that seeks to weaken us as men or just as people in general. And so this is more than just about survival. It is, in essence, about becoming unbreakable, because the world is full of forces trying to break you. It draws on a vast array of weapons, but chiefly among them are fear, resentment, and emptiness. And it's these same three enemies that have plagued the souls of men since the beginning of time. And now it's playing out in our modern cycle. All you got to do is just get on your news feed and you'll see it at work. And just like our ancestors sharpened their swords and spears to battle against physical foes, those who pursued an enlightened path trained their minds and spirits to battle against the enemy within as well. And we know this because the myths and legends that they passed down to us were seeded with signs and clues to lead us along the way. They left us templates for actions to become unbreakable. And that's what this episode is about. It's about it's a primer on forging your spirit through discipline, through story, and through the fire of a heroic life. This transmission is sort of a second installment of the episode I recently did with John Michael Greer about how we operationalize myths in the lives of warriors. In that episode, we discussed what myths are, why they're important or were important to warrior cultures of old, and how to use them to forge a spirit of strength and resilience. So it's just a 30,000 foot view, and I put the link in the show notes. You can find it there if you want to listen to it. But this is going to try to, where we just kind of did an overview and didn't really get deeply into the how. I'm going to walk you through an example on how you can use that. Because the world is trying to break you, and your job is to see that it fails. Our ancestors will show us how. But before we go and get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to my premium subscribers on Substack. Guys, thank you so much for your support, because that helps us keep the lights on and doing what we're doing. If you're interested in becoming a premium subscriber, it's just a couple bucks a month. You can go to our Substack page, link in the description, click on it. There's an upgrade tab. You click it and the rest will take care of itself. So without further ado, we're talking about becoming unbreakable. It's all on the Pearl Snap Tactical Podcast, and we're starting right now. What's up, gang, and welcome back. Still recorded live from an undisclosed location south of the Mason-Dixon line. This is the Pearl Snap Tactical Podcast, and we're talking about becoming unbreakable. At some point in our lives, I've been on 3 continents. I've met a lot of people, and this is what my conclusion is that at some point, you as a man are going to stand face to face with the same 3 enemies, and those are fear, resentment, and emptiness. Now think about it. We've all felt the sting of fear at some point in our lives. You may be experiencing it today. It's that type of venom that paralyzes you in place. It freezes you. It destroys your confidence and whispers things like, don't go for it. You're not ready yet. What if you lose? So on. Just think about it. How many opportunities have you let slip because fear talked you out of pursuing them? And then there's resentment. Our world is awash in bitterness and resentment right now. Resentment ties you to the past, to every slight, every envy that you've ever experienced, until all you're carrying around is bitterness. How many relationships have you lost, or blessings have you failed to recognize in your life, all because resentment held you by the throat? And then finally, there's emptiness. It's that void that just seems to be pressing on your chest. It hollows out your drive, your sense of purpose, even your hope at times. It turns joy into dust, and it makes action feel meaningless. How many passions in your life, adventures you could have gone on, or connections that were meaningful to you, you've let slip away because some emptiness or some slight you feel like you've encountered, to convince you that none of it really matters anyway. But fear and resentment and emptiness, these rob you of life one moment at a time. And the question is, are you going to let them? If you've ever found yourself stuck in that kind of mind loop of self-defeating narratives, I've got good news, because our ancestors did not leave us defenseless. They left us myth. And they left us stories and legends from the lore to serve as a template for action and victory. So when you read these stories, you may have not looked at them that way, but that's why they were there. They weren't just to sit around a campfire and pass the time. These were template for actions in these cultures, and they're just as viable for us to use today as they were back then. And so I'm going to share with you one of the most sacred stories from our past, and it's one where we find three forces, three gods, and three gifts that will help us overcome these enemies. This episode is about that story. It's about three brothers who gave a spirit and a mind and fire inside. And it's about how to awaken those gifts in yourself before fear consumes you, before resentment defines you, and before the void swallows you whole. So this episode is really a story about you. So let's go back to the beginning. Section 1 is driftwood on the shore. So in this episode, I want to give you an example of how to unleash the power of these ancient myths in your life. We live in a postmodern materialist age that has sucked our souls dry of the richness and vitality that the spirit of our ancestors once commanded. So rediscovering and accessing this power of these stories is the key to rekindle that ancient flame to burn within you today. If you would dare see the world through their eyes, if you would take up their challenges as your own and live with the same courage, honor, and relentless will that shaped these legends and these stories, then you will create an epic life story of your own. And so for this episode, I've chosen a story from a collection called the Poetic Edda, also known as the Elder Edda. It's a collection of Old Norse poems preserved back in the 13th century, in a collection called the Codex Regius. And though its contents are far older, rooted in the oral traditions of pre-Christian Scandinavia, and in some respect, the greater Germanic world, among one of its most poems, and the ones that we're going to take a selection from, is called the Voluspa, or the Prophecy of the Seeress, in which a vulva, which is just a wise woman or a prophetess, recounts the creation of the world, the deeds of gods and men, and the doom that awaits them at Ragnarok. So rich in myth, symbolism, and cosmic vision, the Voluspa serves as both a creation myth and apocalyptic prophecy, framing the Norse worldview in a cycle of birth, destruction, and renewal. So let us begin. So at this point in the poem, before there were humans, there was driftwood, not people that washed up upon the shore, not people, not proto-humans, just two pieces of wood washed up on the shore of a lifeless world. And their names were Asker and Embla, which translate to ash and elm. That's all they were, just raw material, but with potential. And then three gods found them. And in the Voluspa, the seeress tells Odin, quote, "Until three came from the company, powerful and loving Aesir. They found on the land, little strength had they, ash and elm, fateless. They gave no breath, no mind, no warmth, until the gods did this," end quote. And that's where the story begins. In this version of the story, we learn that Odin and his two brothers, Honir and Lodr, and in other tellings of the story, his brothers' names are Vili and Ve, they stood over these lifeless forms, these pieces of driftwood, of what would eventually become the first man and woman, Asker and Embla. And each god gave to them a gift. Odin bequeathed to them Ond, which is spirit. It's the living spark that animates the flesh and stirs the soul. Honir gave Vit, which is mind, consciousness, reason, and the seed of choice itself. That's the foundation of human will, and we'll get back to that later on. And then in this telling, there was Lother, who bestowed La or Liedergolde, which is form, the color, of your skin, the vitality, the fire of life, the pulse of passion and desire, the drive that moves a being to take action in the world. So in another telling, the first humans were shaped, like I said, by his brothers by a different name of Vili and Ve. And together in that version, they find these lifeless pieces of wood that become Asker and Embla, and they give them gifts that would define their humanity. And again, in this version, Odin breathed life into them, or giving them spirit, the animating force that separates the living from the inanimate. And Vili granted them intelligence and will, the ability to think, reason, make choices, and shape their own path. And then Ve bestows appearance and vitality and warmth, the physical form and beauty that makes life tangible, capable of expression. So in that version, the pattern is strikingly familiar, right? They're a little different, but overall, the story kind of coalesces into the same thing, where you've got Odin given the spirit, you've got mind, you have the will and the body, vitality, the same pillars as in the Honer-Lother account, just under different names and slightly different emphases. Though the gods' names differ between the two accounts, the gifts they offer are remarkably consistent. So, again, one last time, because it's very important, Odin gives a spark of life that animates every human being. Then you get the other gift, which is the mind and will. This is the seed of human will, the power to shape your own destiny, and then form or vitality and passion. So Lother or Ve gives the body energy, the drive, the fire of life, right? That stirs that within you, enabling action and passionate engagement in the world. So regardless of the version you read, the story points are kind of the same. Humans are a fusion of spirit, mind, and living will, living energy, designed to act, designed to choose, and to live fully. So together, these gifts forged the first humans, the union of spirit, mind, and body that's capable of thought, choice, and passionate action. So Asker in the story, Asker and Embla rise. They're fully alive. They're standing at the dawn of the world, and their hearts and minds are shaped on their own destiny. And so they are alive. They are awakened. They are now human. So let's pause there, because this is more than just a creation myth. This is a code, right? In the myth, gods didn't just breathe life into the first humans, and that's how we got here, right? They imprinted a map onto our souls, right, that we can use. So, but before we kind of got to know, though, that the central figure, apart from Asker and Embla, really is Odin himself. And we've got to talk about him if you're not familiar with that character and mythology. So the story will lose some of its punch if you don't understand the background of him and how he's involved. So for our ancestors, an understanding of who Odin is and how he figured in the myths would have been understood at the cellular level. But for most of us moderns who are not steeped in the lore, a little background's in order. And trust me, once you understand the nature of Odin and the way he figures in the story in the tale of Asker and Embla, that story becomes much more powerful. So let's flesh that out. So in Norse mythology, and even really greater Germanic philosophy, or mythology, Odin, Wotan, he's got several names. He's not just the quote unquote chief god of the pantheon. He embodies something much older. It's much wilder, and in some instances even darker. But his very name is tied to the Old Norse word of Other, which is one of the gifts he bestows to Asker and Embla. His name carries with it meanings like fury, inspiration, battle frenzy, ecstasy, and most importantly, spirit. So that's important because Odin himself is the restless spirit of becoming. He's never static in the stories. He's always seeking to increase in wisdom and power and mastery, which is something we should be all aspiring to do in our own lives as well. So you may have heard the story of how he sacrificed an eye. He's often referred to as the one-eyed God. This is not a symbolic gesture. It's actually a mythic act that occurred at Mimir's well, which is the well of wisdom. So you've got this cosmic primeval well, right, at the bottom of the world tree, where basically the repository of all wisdom is. And Odin wants to take a drink from that well to get more wisdom, to become more, to become wiser, to see more, to know more. And so, but he had to give something up. And so he gave up half of his sight to gain deeper wisdom. So he sought the kind of perception that pierces beneath just the surface level of things in the world, right? To understand it in a deeper way. And so by placing his eye into the well, in exchange from drinking from its waters, he traded the ordinary, his eye, for the extraordinary, right? Which was, he sacrificed the comfortable for the costly. And that's the core of his character that you see over and over again in the myths that surround him. In order to become unbreakable, he sacrifices himself again and again to become more, right? And there's also one term I wanted to define there. So when the Voluspa early on, when I read that passage, it mentioned the word or term Aesir, right? That's a catch term that refers to the gods that Odin leads. There, it's more nuanced than that, but that's kind of a catch-all phrase, and it represents the forces of order, strength, sovereignty in the cosmos. So they are the ones that struggle to hold chaos at bay. They built the world out of the bones of Ymir the giant, and even if they fight, that their end will come soon one day in Ragnarok, right? So that's kind of them. So as I mentioned earlier, the story of Asker and Embla is more than a creation myth, it's a code. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about the battle within, because I talked about the battle against fear, resentment, and emptiness, and you see that the gifts that these gods, these brothers bestow to mankind is there to equip them to do battle with these three empty enemies. So the three gifts, I'm talking so dang fast, y'all, because I'm so excited about this, but I'm very passionate about this story. So the three gifts, the spirit of Odin, the mind of Vili, and the fire of Ve, correspond directly to the enemies we named at the start. So let's walk through them. So 1, fear meets Odin. So as I said earlier, Odin is spirit. He's the breath. He is your breath, the part that reaches for something higher, the part of you that seeks wisdom, even if it comes to at a price, right? The price of your comfort, an aspect of your life, that type of thing. And it coincides in a sense, if you think about what he's tied to, is the god of poetry, battle frenzy, mystic vision, right? All these are tied to inspiration, right? So we understand that fear cannot live long in the presence of a strong spirit, because the spirit doesn't seek safety. It seeks meaning. It knows death is coming either way, right? We all are going to die at some point. So when it makes a sacrifice, it wants that sacrifice to count. Right? That's what a vibrant, a spirit infused with vitality does. It sacrifices intentionally, smartly, circumspectly, but it does so in a way that's meaningful and counts. So to overcome fear, you've got to breathe like Odin. You have to move toward the unknown, outside of your comfort zone, not away from it. Right? And this doesn't mean recklessness, but it means that you accept your fate and you act anyway. And that's the warrior's first lesson, is that you kill fear in your life with meaning. If something is meaningful to you, if you have a purpose that means something to you, then it's worth fighting for, it's worth sacrificing for. Even if you lose, it's worth reaching out and pursuing. And that is the first thing that we learn when we read this story. The next thing we see is, how do we deal with resentment, right? Vili is interpreted as, or can be interpreted as, will or intention. But in this myth he gives vit, which is understanding, clarity and discernment. Like I mentioned, there's another tale where the gift is bestowed by a brother by a different name, Honor, which is sometimes referred to as the quiet, the contemplative God, who sometimes is called the silent one or indecisive one. In some stories, Honor can't act unless Loki tells him what to do. So what do we make of that? Well, here's the point, is that a mind without spirit, a mind without that fire, it's weak and rudderless, right? But a mind that is guided by spirit, right, and powered by fire becomes razor sharp, right? So you got to have them both. So resentment thrives in confusion, right, and shallow thinking, in dysfunctional feed loops. It feeds off of blaming others, virtue signaling, or on playing the victim card, right? Feeling sorry for yourself, those types of things. And there is so much resentment in this world today, and most of it is misplaced. But to overcome resentment, you have to awaken the gift of Vili in your life, which is the instance, which in this instance is a disciplined mind. So by leveraging the power to assess things honestly, right, to think clearly, even under pressure, is to take ownership of your own path. So if you kill fear with meaning or with the spirit, you kill resentment with clarity and responsibility, right? The responsibility to take action. And then finally, we have emptiness, which meets ve or lother. This is the most mysterious of the gifts because ve gives la, which can mean blood and warmth or sacred form, but lother in the alternate version gives what's called leather goda, good color, vitality, and physical beauty. Either way, it doesn't matter which version you're looking at, it kind of communicates the same, that it's the gift of embodiment, which is fire, which is passion, and the willingness to live fully. So nihilism is what happens when the spirit and the mind become divorced from any action, right? Emptiness is the absence of the sacred. In a sense, it's driftwood without the fire inside, right? But Ve is the one who makes things sacred. In fact, his name is connected to a sacred enclosure or a temple, right? So he turns a space into a sanctuary, right? Motion into ritual, and life into something that matters. So to overcome nihilism, you need to act with the fire of purpose. So you train with purpose, you build with purpose, you love your family and your friends and your kinsmen with purpose. You do things that affirm life has worth. So you kill emptiness with sacred embodiment. All right, so now let's talk about the power of three and what do we take from all this? So the Norse, like I said earlier, I mean, the Norse weren't just telling stories around the campfire. They weren't just sharing these myths to explain how nature works and stuff like that you may have learned in junior high when you were first talking about the myths. The Greco-Roman world and stuff like that. I remember when I was in seventh grade, we did a segment on the Greek myths, and that was kind of my first exposure to the world of myth. And I still remember this to this day, that the teacher told us that, oh, these were just, they didn't have science. These are just kind of dumb ancient people, and they didn't know how lightning worked and physical phenomena. And so they just kind of created these stories to help explain it and create their worldview. And that is absolutely false. That is not true, and these had a much deeper meaning to them. So, for our instance, right, this was a blueprint for what it means to be a whole, capable human being. They saw life as requiring these three core forces, and that is spirit, right, the drive that gives you the courage and purpose to take action in the presence of fear. It is the mind, right? Not just to think, but the clarity to see things as they are and make sound decisions. And of course, the will, which is the power to take action even when things are hard. If you lose any one of those, right, you're crippled, right? You might have willpower, but no clear mind. So you just burn yourself out picking the wrong battles. You might have intelligence, but no spirit. So you overthink and you never move. You are stuck in what they call paralysis by analysis, right? And so you miss out, right? You might have spirit, but no will. So you dream big, you've got a big vision, but then you don't ever do anything about it. We all know people like that, don't we? The myth of Asker and Embla isn't just about how the gods made humans. It's about how we become truly human again. So you're the driftwood. If you're a man, you're Asker. If you're a woman, you are Embla. And the only way you rise from the sand on that seashore is to call back the three, right? You call upon Odin when you're afraid. You call upon Vili or Honor when your mind is clouded. And you call upon Ve or Lother when you've gone numb, right? And to become really powerful, to experience real victory, you call upon all three. And when I say call upon, quote unquote, it doesn't matter if you take this literally or figuratively, metaphorically, right? When it's done with focus and intention, the outcome's going to be the same, right? The Norse understood that power moves in threes, and even Odin needed his brothers to finish the work. Even the king of the gods doesn't create alone, and neither do you, right? So let's talk about getting practical, right? This is the part that's really hard, right? Because this is the individual part. I can't tell you how to awaken these gifts in your soul. Some of this is going to be through trial and error. Some of this is going to be through your own journey, but I can kind of give you some examples. So in awakening your spirit, it's going to require sacrifice of you, right? Something that you fear of losing, right? You don't do this. You don't sacrifice recklessly, like I said, but you do it consciously, right? So some examples, and these are probably like super low level, just for the sake of discussion, but it can be something as simple as just training in discomfort or days when you don't feel like it, right? Keeping the polishing your spirit, making it strong, getting it to invigorate you even when you don't feel like it. Speaking a hard truth, right? Or having that difficult conversation with someone that you've been putting off, right? Spending time studying or pursuing a new skill, right? That will breathe new life into you, right? Taking up a new pursuit. But it costs you, right? It costs you your time. It costs you your energy and your effort. Fasting, this is something a lot of people don't like to don't talk about because it's something that makes us uncomfortable, but there's been a lot of scientific studies on fasting. If that's something that you want to pursue, I've done it a few times and I've had good results with it, but make sure that you're medically cleared to do something like that. Do it smartly and ease into it. Meditation is something, and maybe I'll do a deeper dive on this because a lot of times we think about meditation, we kind of think of the Eastern kind of traditions where you just kind of sit on a mat and just kind of think of nothing, or you focus on one thing, that type of thing. But there's other forms, and the Western traditions have, well, the word meditate comes from a Latin term anyway. So there's other forms of that, but you can do some research on that too. And again, I have a meditation practice and it's worked well for me. So I don't do it enough though. I will say that. So in taking regardless of what of those bullet points that I just went through that you look through, that you decide to pursue, or a combination of them all, in taking action, you are, in a sense, you are facing death symbolically, right? Because you're giving something up. There's a part of you that's dying. You are sacrificing time, right? You are sacrificing energy, a focus, and things like that. And you're having to put aside something else you could be pursuing, like doom scrolling on your phone or something, or Netflix binging or whatever, right? You're putting that aside and you are focusing in exchange to pursue something else, right? So that is, in a sense, awakening the spirit. What about the mind? So stop numbing yourself with noise and distraction. It's no wonder that we can't really think intentionally about things because we're so inundated with distraction and noise, especially in our digital society and world that we find ourselves in. So Carve some time out to sit alone in the woods. Reflect. Write down your thoughts or start a journaling practice. I've kind of mentioned that before. I'm trying to get in the habit of that. And man, it takes discipline. That's what I struggle, is the discipline to make myself sit down and do this. But man, every time I do, I come away with some pretty insightful things that have helped me. So again, doesn't matter what type of practice you adopt. You can do your research out there, but it's very insightful and very beneficial. And in doing so, you seek to uncover the deeper truths that are within you, that you have been equipped by the divine, that are there waiting for you to access. And so what I mean by that, part of that will include being an honest broker with yourself. And that can be a heavy lift at times. Why? Because most people can't even recognize the resentment that they carry with them at times. If you find yourself bitter because something hasn't happened to you, or something has happened to you that you feel like you don't deserve, or you didn't get the break that you thought you needed, or if there's something missing from your life, well, you need to figure out a plan of attack to go get it. But before you do that, you got to be able to make an honest assessment of yourself and where you're at physically, mentally, and spiritually before you can set a new course or direction for your life. And that's what I mean by being an honest broker with yourself. And I will say, speaking from experience, it's easier said than done. All right, what about awakening the fire inside of you, the will, cultivating the will, right? So moving your body, creating something beautiful that requires a skill. So you may have to gain that skill, right, in order to do it. Even something as simple as planning and tending a garden, training with your hands. How about this? Making a vow and keeping it, right? Those types of things. So stop doom scrolling and Netflix binging and use your time to pursue something that is meaningful, something that will bring meaning into your life, right? Your task isn't to feel better. That's not what we're talking about. It's to become whole, right? And that's the thing about this story, right? One thing I think is really cool, if you read the Voluspa, which I highly recommend, you can go online, you can download a free copy of it. But you see that Asker and Embla, I mean, so they're endowed with these gifts that make them powerful, that make them a participant in shaping their own destiny. But then that's kind of where the story leaves it. It goes into other things, but we don't really hear a lot about Asker and Embla about that. They don't figure in the myths and the stories, none that I'm aware of. But I think that's the point. The point isn't for the myth to then spoon feed you of, okay, so Asker and Embla incorporated these gifts and they did XYZ. Now you go and do likewise. No, it's open-ended, because you, like I said earlier, you are Asker, or if you're a female, you are Embla. And so now it is time for you to finish the story, right? You are to embark on the path. You are to proceed forward to the journey, to learn how to leverage, to master these gifts, right? To assess them, to access them, and to use them to shape your own destiny through the force of your will, right? And that is what, to me, that myth is about. Fear, resentment, and emptiness. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are ready, right? The gods are watching it on the beach again, and you're still raw timber, but they're willing to breathe these gifts into you, the breath of spirit, the mind of clarity, the fire to rekindle your sacred will. And so the question is, will you receive it? Will you rise? Or will you just stay driftwood? The choice is yours. All right, guys, that's what I've got for this episode. This one was important to me. I even put on Substack on some notes I posted that I recorded this. I wrote it twice, and twice I deleted it because it sucked. And so I hope this was worthy of you and your time and attention. I hope that you found value from it. Again, the purpose wasn't to spoon feed you a step-by-step plan to resurrect or access these gifts within you, that is your story. How you do that is your story. But your job is to go back, ponder what we talked about, ponder this story, think deeply on it, and then as the insights, as the unctions and the urges come, then to you to examine those and to act on them. That is the power of myth. And in my mind, that's what these stories are about. If you got any questions or comments, leave them below or just hit me up in the DM and I'll answer them any way I can. If you've got questions about topics, if you want me to go deeper, even though this was kind of a deeper dive on the conversation that I had with John Michael Greer, it goes much deeper than that. So if that's something you're interested in, if you want to hear tales of other examples from the myths of how you can leverage these in your own life, let me know, because this is part of warrior culture. Guys, this is what our ancestors did. Every bit as much as swinging a sword or swinging the axe, it was seeping themselves in these stories, these templates for actions, and then going out and leveraging the power of these sagas, of these legends to achieve victory in their own life. So that would conclude this episode, guys. So thank you very much for listening. And once again, I'm Mark signing off, telling you to stay sharp and keep it pearl snapped.